Thanks for tuning in at Brackies. Hello everyone and welcome to video number 7 in the How to Make a 2D Platformer course. Today we're going to finally be adding some character animations by utilizing the scripts from the standard assets that already sits on our player and setting up an animator controller that fits with that script. So let's just delve right into it today, no long intros. As always, I've opened up Unity. And you can see when we get in here and hit play that our character simply only flips and doesn't really animate at all. So if we select our player, you can see that we have disabled the sprite renderer. This was our robot. And actually we're just going to go ahead and remove this component completely. Then we also have a 2D animator, which right now has a animator controller attached. We're going to keep the animator and also enable it, but we are not going to use this animator. We are going to use our own separate one that we will set up to work with the current way we have set up our graphics and with our sprite sheet. So the animator right now works, if we double click this, we can view it, and it's under the sample assets 2D animations. Here's the animator controller. And you can see how the different animations work together. You can also see we have a few different parameters that these animations will transition based on. But what we are going to do is create a bit more of a simple animator that will really only have an idle, a walk, and a jump. So that's what we're going to do. And we're gonna create a completely new one, but let's just keep this around for now. Should we need to need this for reference? Cool. So let's head back into the scene view here. Let's head back under the assets, and let's right-click, hit Create, Animator Controller, and let's call this Player Controller. Actually, let's do Player Anim Control. There we go. Okay, so player anim controller, and let's drag this onto the player's animator. Make sure you do this or it of course won't work. Now the way the animations were set up before is they were simply changing the sprite in the sprite component. But now, right now we don't have a sprite renderer. Our sprite renderer instead sits on a separate object called graphics. This really gives us more control, but also we will also need to access this game object's sprite renderer whenever we switch out sprites. So in order to do this, let's create our first animation. We do this by opening the animation window, and please don't mistake this with the animator. They are two separate windows. Now let's hit this empty space, or you can just hit record, and let's hit create new clip, and let's call this player idle, and let's do anim, and hit save. So now in here we actually can place down different keyframes for all sorts of different values for our player. So if we hit add curve, you can see that we have all kinds of component information and parameters and values that we can tweak during this timeline. And we are going to delve into another object called the graphics. And then under this, we are going to delve into the sprite renderer and then add the one called sprite. So this will allow us to change out the sprite as we move forward. And you can see right now it's simply set 2 keyframes for the same sprite. And that is all we want. This animation here is just going to be 1 second long, and it's not going to change anything. It's simply going to have the idle sprite attached so that we can transition to this and the player will just stand still. You could of course have a whole idle animation where he will maybe breathe in and out a bit, or move, or do a flip or something. But for now, to keep things simple, and also because this is pixel art and it's difficult to do such fine movements, we're simply gonna leave it as is. Then we're gonna go ahead and create another animation. So hit create new clip. And let's call this player jump anim. And this is gonna be pretty much just as boring. We're gonna hit add curve, go under the graphics, under the sprite renderer, and add the sprite parameter. I actually don't know what these are called. Let's just call them parameters for now. And instead of this sprite here, which is the idle sprite, we're going to insert our jump sprite. And in order to do this, we can simply select our graphics object in the hierarchy and go over to sprite renderer, and you will notice that the sprite renderer sprite setting has turned red. And this is because it's currently being watched by the animator. It's being recorded. So what we can simply do is we can go in here and we can select the right one. So we're going to select the jump one. You can see astronaut jump. Double click that, and now it's the astronaut jump. But make sure that we switch it back over here also. So maybe we can just delete this keyframe and then copy the jump over. So Control-C or Command-C, copy it over there. And that's basically all we needed to do. So now that we have this in place, we can go ahead and create the only exciting animation we're going to be making today, which is the walk or run animation. So let's just go ahead and do that. So now let's stop recording and let's go into the project pane. And instead of adding each separate sprite and going through, Unity has made a pretty cool, very quick way to do these sorts of animations. Simply select the sequence by holding down Shift, clicking in the first sprite, holding down Shift, and then clicking at the last sprite in the sequence, and then simply drag into Unity. This will simply create a new animation for us with those sprites in order. So let's go ahead and save this as player. Let's do run. Let's just do walk and anim and hit save. And it will add in another object here which has that animation, and it also has an animator and all that kind of stuff. But we're just going to delete that, and we're going to delete the automatically generated controller here also, the astronaut sprite atlas _0, just because we're not going to be needing that. But the cool thing about this is that it automatically generated a player walk animation which we can use. So now we simply, all we need to do here, actually we really don't need to do, let's see. Oh yeah, the problem with this animation now, when we go under the player and play this animation, we can just quickly do so maybe. No, actually, yeah, we can do so. Let's try and add it to the animation controller here. So double click the player animator anim controller, and in here you can see we have an idle, a jump, and a walk. And if we go ahead and if you don't have these, by the way, all you need to do is right click, hit create state, empty, and then select it, and up here you can rename it. Let's say player shoot, just for instance. And then we can add a motion here, so simply drag in the clip. Or instead of doing all that, you can simply drag in the clip and it will automatically add it for you. Cool. So once we're inside this animator controller, we can make transitions between the different animations. But right now I just want to check out if the player walk animation will work. My guess is that it won't, because what we did when we created this is animate the sprite renderer that sits on top of the player, when really we need to animate the one under the graphics, just as with the two other animations. But let's just have a go at it to see if it works. In order to do this, we need to make sure that this animation is the first one that will play. And to do this, we right click and hit set as default. You can see that it's now orange, which means that it will play by default. So cool. So we have under the player, we have an animator where we have the player anim controller as the controller. And inside of this, we have 3 states where the default is the player walk animation. Let's see if this works. Don't think it will. No, indeed it doesn't. And yep, it doesn't. So let's instead go ahead and delete this player walk animation and create a real one. So let's go ahead and select the player again. Select the animation. You can see that we get a bunch of warnings here, but that's because some of the parameters aren't present yet. We're going to add those in a sec. So let's go under the animation window here, stop recording. Let's hit add curve. No, I'm sorry, not add curve. Let's go ahead and create a new clip. So we'll just do this by hand, called player walk anim. Hit save. And let's see here if we dock this up here. Simply drag and drop it to dock it. And then select the sequence and drag it in here. Indeed, we get keyframes for that sequence. But again, it's changing the player sprite, and that's not what we want. We want the graphic sprite. So let's right click and hit delete key. Oops, remove property. That's what it's called. It's called property, not parameter. And let's hit add curve. Go under the graphics object. Go under the sprite renderer. Go under sprite and hit that and add that. And now let's see if we delete this. Nope, we don't want to do that. Let's just delete the last one maybe. And let's see if we drag this in. Nope. Okay, so we're going to have to do this by hand. So the first one here, let's select the graphics object. And let's select the astronaut sprite atlas _0. Then we're going to move forward. Let's do... I don't know how fast we want this to go. We can set the sample rate to 12. That's a basis. Anything between maybe 6 or 8 to 16 is a normal sample rate for these kinds of 2D games. Sample rate is just how fast it will update. Think of it as frames per second. It's basically the same thing, but not quite. So now we move forward 1 sample, and let's change this to astronaut sprite atlas _1. Again, move forward 1, change it to _2, move forward 1, and I'm just gonna quickly do these. It's a good thing we don't have too many. There's got to be an easier way, and I have yet to find it. There we go. So now we have actually a full walk cycle. So if we drag this down here again, so we can see it in action and hit play, you can see that our character is indeed doing a walk animation. So let's try that one more time. Here, select the, whoops, where did there. So let's play this, and you can see that he's walking back and forth. We could do some adjustment for the arm to make it follow. We could add an animation for that also, or we could do plenty of stuff. But when we zoomed out this much and moving at the same time, I don't think it's going to be too noticeable. So that's a second priority. Let's just get this working first. Cool. Now we need to set up the animator controller. So right now you can see we have a bunch of different states. Oops, it's added too many actually. Let's delete this one. And let's make sure that we add a motion to this one. So the player walk anim here, let's just make sure we drag one under there. And let's set the player idle to be the default. Now we are going to add some different parameters down here. So hit plus. And the first one we are going to add, we are definitely going to need one called speed, which is going to default to 0. We're also going to need another one called ground. Or maybe it's grounded. I don't remember. That's why we kept the controller here. It's just ground. So that will be whenever we stand on the ground. Let's go back in here. Do ground. We're also going to need a boolean for called crouch. And we are not going to be crouching with this character, but it is included in the script. So we can either just add the parameter here or go remove it in the script. But for the sake of ease, we are just going to add it as a parameter. And also that will allow us to do crouching later should we choose to do so. It's not going to be impacting performance. It's really not a big deal. It's just changing a variable. And then last up, we are going to have another float called vSpeed for vertical speed. And this is again not something we're going to be using, but this could be used to see if the character is falling, and then maybe give him some kind of a fall animation. But that's not something we're going to go into. Not yet, anyways. Cool, so he starts out with the player idle animation, and then we maybe want him to transition to a walk whenever our speed is increased. So right click on the player idle animation and hit make transition. You can see you get this arrow, which we are then going to click on the player walk animation. And then click on the line itself and it will turn blue because we have it selected. And in the inspector, we now have a bunch of different settings that we can tweak. We want to go in here and instead of exit time, which is used for blending, we are going to do speed. Maybe I should just quickly explain this. This is our conditions. Up here, this adjusts how the animation blends from one to another. This is not so relevant when we're doing sprites, but it is in 3D animation when you want a smooth transition from a walk to a run or from an idle to a walk. But here we're not doing smooth transitions because we are simply changing sprites. And down here is the conditions tab. And what this will do is will allow us to create basically if statements that will check for values, and if they are met, it will do the transition. So we are going to select the first condition, which is going to be speed. And we're going to say that that has to be greater than, and let's just do 0.1. So if the speed is greater than 0.1, it will just transition to the walk animation. And then we can say make transition and then go back to the player idle animation. And here we can simply say that if speed is less than 0.1, we are going to transition back again to our idle. Then the player jump animation, we really want the player to be able to jump both from the idle or from the walk. So instead of adding transitions from both of them, we are going to use the any state node. So this will allow us to transition no matter what state we're in to that animation. So let's right click on that, hit make transition. Let's click on the arrow here and let's select can transition to self. Then we are going to hit under the condition, select ground is if ground is equal to false, we are going to be jumping. You can see this is very similar to the way they've set it up under the 2D character controller that is included in the standard assets. And you can also see that they simply transition back to the idle. So whenever we're not jumping, we are just by default going to go back to the idle. And then from there we can transition on. So let's just do the same. So let's go back into the player animator controller. And let's in here make a transition from the player jump animation to the idle. And let's in the condition say that if ground is equal to false. And that is basically all we need. So now we should be able to hit play. And you can see that when we start walking, the walking animation plays. And when we jump, the jumping sprite plays. Whoops. For some reason, we are not transitioning back. Let's see what is going on here. And this is another cool thing. If we go ahead and maybe drag the animator over here and drag it out by the inspector, and then hit play, we can in real time see how the animations are played and how the parameters are affected. So let's hit jump. We can see that the ground value is turned on again, but it's staying at the player jump animation. And it's not really trying to play this transition. So this suggests that we've set that up incorrectly. Now let's select the transition, go under conditions, and indeed we need to change this to true. So now let's hit play again. And actually let's maximize this because I think we deserve to see this in full screen. So we stand still and the idle animation is playing. I shouldn't really call it an animation, but the idle sprite is there. And then when we start walking, you can see him playing the walk animation. And when we're in the air, he's just doing his jumpy thing. So that was basically it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. Remember that you can always follow me on Twitter at @BragKeysTweet or get to me at facebook.com/BragKeys if you want to know more about what I'm doing and just follow the progress of the videos. There's also sometimes cool tips and tricks, or if you want to get involved in any way. Cool, so that was it for today's video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.